Hello, my name is Roman Fishman. I'm an attorney, and in the next 10 minutes, I'll go over 6 tips for startups. A little bit about myself. I practice in the area of business law, primarily with startups. Before becoming an attorney, my background was in electrical engineering and media, and I have to tell you that the following is not meant to be legal advice, but is presented merely for informational and educational purposes. That if you have a legal question, you can contact my office directly. You can see the information below, or contact another attorney admitted to practice in your jurisdiction. All right, let's start with tip number 1. Let's talk about the most important issue for startups, and that is money. And what comes with money? Investors, otherwise known as vulture capitalists. All right, all kidding aside, some of my clients are venture capitalists, and I have good friends who are investors themselves. But as a startup, you need to realize that oftentimes your goals and the investor goals are different, that you enable one another and come with mutual benefit, but sometimes with divergent desired outcomes. You need to remember that before you solicit capital from investors. Always ask yourself the question, do I really need that money? I see more and more agreements where VCs get more and more say about management, buyout decisions, and even daily business decisions. If you need an example about the power of investors over a company, just read about filmloop.com. Now, I don't blame investors for wanting more control. It's their hard-earned money and they have entrusted you with, but it is your startup after all. So if you need to take less money and retain more control, maybe that is the better option. And when you do take capital, do not ever use the term burn rate. I forbid my clients from using that term. Instead, you should use the term investment rate. You need to respect your investors' money. You shouldn't be burning it, you should be investing it. By using the term investment rate instead of burn rate, your attitude towards that capital will change. And maybe more important, the VCs will appreciate your concern for their money and are more likely to extend additional help should the startup require it. So be very careful about not soliciting too much capital. Remember that more money you take, the more issues you'll have, and be respectful for that money. Okay, tip number 2. I have some bad news for you. You will be sued. There. The good news is that you will be sued only if you have money or a technology or a service that is worth a lot of money. No one will bother you if you can't pay out. So the good news is that the moment you get sued, you know that you made it. And at that time, the professionals will deal with it. But being that you might get sued, you need to start planning for the future right now. And the best way is by involving professionals in your startup early on. Don't wait for round 1. You should be thinking about involving professionals even in the concept stage. Get yourself an attorney. Now, I know, I'm hawking the merchandise. I'm an attorney and I'm trying to push the likes of myself onto you. No, it is very important to strike relationships with professionals early on because you need somebody to deal with the reality of doing business. So you need someone who can watch out for you. There are many other reasons why you want professionals on your team early on. If you are in a startup with partners, you want somebody to be able to draft an agreement between the partners. If you are showing your startup to VCs or are involved in discussions of any sort, you better have an attorney by your side. You want to have somebody that is able to look into the future and flag problems that may be small right now, but that may grow into bigger issues. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And maybe more important than all is the Bozo filter factor. When you have a professional on your team, it signals to everyone that you passed at least one Bozo filter, and by at least one serious person. And you cannot imagine how many crackheads there are in this field. So this leads me to tip number 3. Know the difference between a good idea and a good business idea. Now, we all know about good ideas. We have 10 of them in the shower every day. Generally, for an idea to be a good business idea, you need to account for clients, markets, demand, scaling, products, revenue, competitors, and ultimately profits. Now, in certain cases, you may have a business model that is not yet operative. That's okay. As an example, in the case of internet advertising that these days allows sites such as Digg.com to be a viable business, when only several years ago it probably would have been impossible to operate profitably. But it is your responsibility to provide an action plan on how to make your business model operative. The key to successful business planning is to be honest, primarily with yourself and then with your investors. You should have two versions of your business plan: the executive summary version, which you will use for investors, banks, etc., and a much more detailed version for your internal use. Do not give one of those 50-page dissertations to VCs. No one wants to read it. In most cases, your executive summary should be no more than 7 to 10 pages. If VCs or whoever want a more detailed plan, they'll tell you. And don't use such buzz killers like conservative estimates, terms that require financial dictionary to decipher. And please, don't plan for the distant future. Keep your projections realistic and grounded in the present. Use your common sense, a commodity that is always appreciated. So remember, less is more, common sense, and do not provide projections for the 22nd and 23rd centuries. All right, tip number 4, you need to look at yourself and determine who you are. Now, typically in a startup, 3 hats need to be covered: the visionary, the manager, the techie, and the business salesperson. That is, visionary, manager, techie, and the business salesperson. It is best if these hats are worn by different people. Ideally, a startup would be made up of at least 3 people, each wearing 1 hat. If you have less than 3 people, be mindful that one of you will have to wear more than 1 hat. Now, this means that you should consider bringing additional partners on board. Now, it could be the attorney that you've been working with, and the accountant, a friend, a colleague, etc. Always remember that the more people are involved in the startup, the greater the chances that the startup will succeed. If you think about the concept of 6 degrees of separation, every single person that comes aboard brings with them a wealth of knowledge and contacts. Now, the more people you have involved in your startup, the more people have a stake in the success of that startup. Obviously, you want to strike a balance between equity and the number of partners and equity owners. But where you have a chance to add valuable people on board in exchange for some equity, chances are your investment will pay off in the future tenfold. Remember, it is better to own a little of a lot than a lot of nothing. Now, as partners, you need to clearly divide responsibilities and have a working structure for decision making. And I'm going to tell you how to reach decisions as long as you do it in a structured and predictable manner. It is very impressive for VCs to see a startup that has a good working structure with a clear decision making process. It's very competitive out there, and you become very attractive if you can reach decisions in a coherent way. It makes things easier for VCs, and therefore more likely that you will get funding as opposed to another startup. All right, tip number 5. This is an important tip and often overlooked, and I think I'm going to get flack for it because people think it's not important, but I know that you are likely to be consumed with the technical aspects of the startup every waking moment, and many times you even dream about it. Hopefully no nightmares, but you should make the time to mingle, party, network. Even if you are busy, most of your success will come from personal contact. Remember, vitamin C, as in connections. Knowing someone is as important, if not more important, than having a good idea. Think about your college mates, grad school professors, virtual communities, etc. Do not discount anyone. If you followed the previous tip, then your sales and business person should also be your designated partier. Although you should all network, mingle, and have fun. No one wants to do business with boring people, so party on. All right, finally, tip number 6. Save all your little napkins that you wrote the business plan on and the first computer keyboard that you spilled coffee on. Neatly organize them. You'll need something to put in your company's museum. So you might as well start collecting now. And if the startup does not work out, it'll be easy to get rid of all the junk you just organized. My name is Roman Fishman, and I hope these 6 tips for startups have been helpful to you. You can see a transcript of these tips at thelegalist.com.